everybody, it's Wednesday. And Wednesday means it's Q&A day, which is always fun and interesting for me to see what questions you all have for me. Now, I usually get a tough question or two in there. I usually have some interesting questions for sure. But man, you guys brought some really tough questions for me in this week's episode. So hopefully I don't have everybody close out of this video and think, man, I don't like that guy anymore, because some of the questions are very tough ones. But I'm going to be honest. I'm going to give you my opinions. And I think it's good to go through hard questions as well, polarizing questions as well. Because again, if we don't stand for anything, then what do we stand for? And so that's kind of my thought process. It'll be interesting to see what you all think about my opinions and my comments for this week's episode. I will not skip the hard questions and only answer the softball. That's not what I'm going to do. I will continue to answer the tough questions as much as I do any of them. If you have a question for an upcoming episode, down below in the comments, please take a moment and simply type your question. Also, it's not too late. Remember, I'm giving away a 1960 Topps Mickey Mantle All-Star in a PSA 4. It's a beautiful card, and I'm giving it away on Monday, this coming Monday, November 20th. Remember, the Whatnot Card Show 3 is November 16th through the 19th. And if you've not yet signed up for Whatnot, I have a link down below in the pinned comments and in the description where you'll get $15 free to spend. And if you spend it and you sign up, and then in the comments below you just tell me your Whatnot username, you will be entered into the drawing for the Mickey Mantle card. So again, it's not too late. You still have a few more days. I have to cut off the deadline, so it'll be Sunday night will be the last day that I will be taking new entries, because at some point I have to set this whole thing up, because there are quite a few people who have entered, which I don't blame them. It's a cool Mickey Mantle card. So Whatnot Card Show 3 this weekend, 16th to the 19th. I'm going to be popping into a bunch of rooms. Here is a list of some of the specific vintage dealers that have been recommended that I share, and I think you all will enjoy. So I hope that you'll check out some of those, and I hope you'll take advantage of the free $15. Remember, this weekend there are going to be 1,000 different sellers, more than 1,000 different sellers, and they will be selling over 500,000 cards. Some of the big dealers in the market are not going to the card shows this weekend because instead they're focusing on the Whatnot Card Show. So check it out. I genuinely enjoy Whatnot. I think you will too if you give it a shot. So check it out. And again, you could win that mantle. But let's go ahead now and take a look at our very first question of the week.
Regarding cards from the 1970s and early 80s, would you ever consider buying a high-grade card from an off-brand grading company, cracking it, and submitting to PSA or SGC?
All right. I think this is a good question. I think this is a really good question. And I don't know if my answer is going to be an easy response. Ultimately, I would say it depends. It depends on the card. It depends on the condition. It depends on the third-party grading company that we're talking about. You know, when I see a card, and I'm just going to be totally honest with you, when I see a card that is not, especially a vintage card, but especially when I see a vintage card and it's not in either a PSA or SGC holder, my first thought is, well, why isn't it in a PSA or SGC holder? Is there a reason? See, I speculate, and that's part of just who I am and how I'm wired, is I go, is it not in a PSA holder because they tried PSA and it got non-authenticated? Is it in a this third party holder because SGC gave it, a trimmed grade? I mean, why are we going to these other companies? Now, it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with these other companies. I have said for quite a while that we need there to be at least 4 or 5 really good options, because the 4 or 5 really good options are going to create competition, and the competition is going to create improved service, lower prices, and innovation. But at the same time, I'll admit, that's my initial thought is, why did you choose that company that I've never heard of? Now, a couple of the companies, CGC and BVG, and some of these are more well-known, but then there are some that, frankly, I've seen cards graded in, and I've never even heard of the company before. So I would be a little bit of I would speculate a little bit. I would be a little bit concerned initially. Now, you're asking specifically about cards from the 70s and the 80s. Now, there aren't a ton of cards from the 70s and 80s that are crazy expensive. Now, if you're talking about, would I buy a 1980 Topps Rickey Henderson and a 10 holder of a company I've never heard of? Probably not. I don't think the risk reward would be worth it for me. That doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with the card. Just because the third-party company is what was used doesn't mean that the third-party company is bad. It doesn't mean that anything happened. But, I mean, I'm being honest, and my honest response is, well, why did they go with that company? So first thing I would do is, again, it goes back to buy the card, not the grade. So I would look the card over really carefully, more carefully than I would if it was in, an SGC or a PSA holder. So I would go, okay, let's look this card over really good. Is there something that looks off with this card? Or does it look good? Does it look okay? Would I do this? Would I try this on a $50 card? Sure, I would. Because I think it's a little bit of a risk. It shouldn't be a little bit of a risk, but because of how I'm wired, I would consider it a little bit of a risk, because as soon as you crack it out of the holder, any sort of, warranty or standing behind the product, behind the grade, that goes out the window because it's no longer in the holder. So the second you crack it out, all of the liability, all of the, supporting the grade and the evaluation is now gone. So that's a risk. Plus, you also run the risk of damaging the card when you break it out. So what I might recommend is, if it was kind of an expensive card and you were thinking about doing it, I would maybe consider a crossover. I would maybe, instead of cracking it and sending it, I might send it to like an SGC and see if they could cross it over to an SGC. And if you would be okay with a lower grade, I mean, when you do a crossover, you can say, hey, say the card's in a 9 holder and you want to send it to SGC, and you'd be okay if it was in an 8. You can do a crossover with any grade of like 8 or above. So maybe it would keep the 9, or maybe it would drop to an 8 or an 8.5. So that's an option. So if it was an expensive card, and for me, with my budget, I would say anything that's expensive would be over, I don't know, maybe $150. I would probably lean toward doing a crossover, not doing a straight crack and submit to a different company. If it was a cheaper card, it's a Ryan Sandberg rookie or a Don Mattingly rookie, and again, you said 70s and 80s, so, maybe it's an Eddie Murray rookie card, something like that. That's not a crazy expensive card, but it's a nice card. I would probably lean towards cracking and submitting instead of doing a crossover. So it kind of depends on the card. I'd look it over closer than I normally would, and then I would probably crack it if it wasn't an expensive card. If it was an expensive card, I would look at doing a crossover option instead. But would I consider doing this? Absolutely. Again, if you buy the card, not the grade, and buy the card, not the holder, then there can be a really nice card in a third-party holder of a company that we're not very familiar with. So we always have to be open to those opportunities if those opportunities present themselves.
What do you suggest for a set builder? Do I just grade the stars or do I leave them all raw?
Now, this is it's a really good question, and it's something I thought about because, I have one set. I have one complete set. It's a 1979 top set, which is the year I was born. And I worked on the set for a while, and then my dad finished the set for me. And, that card, the big card in that set is obviously, the Ozzie Smith rookie card. Another card that's a pretty big card is the Nolan Ryan. The Nolan Ryan in my set, honestly, it legitimately looks like a 10 to me. And I've thought about grading it many times. The thing about that card, though, is it's not worth a ton if it were to get like a 7 or a 6. It wouldn't be worth grading. So, but I have thought about grading it, but I haven't graded it. Now, the Ozzie Smith is a nice card too, but knowing how tough they grade nowadays, part of me is like, well, if it got an 8, it would definitely be worth grading. But if it got a 7, it might be worth grading. And I kind of think it's a 7 or an 8. So I haven't graded them. So whenever I give advice, I try to go, well, what have I done if I've been in that situation, right? And I've been in this situation and I haven't graded the cards, but I've really considered grading those 2 cards. Now, I think the answer is it depends on what the set is. If it's a 52 top set, then yeah, I think, if it's a 52 top set that's just in any condition, like a low condition, like all ones, I might not grade it. But if it's a 52 top set and it's in like a mid-grade, I'd grade it. I would definitely grade. I'd probably grade the whole thing, right? If it's a T206 set, probably missing a couple of cards at least, I would grade the whole thing. But if it's a 1968 top set or a 1973 top set, I would not grade the whole thing because some of those cards just don't have the value to, in my opinion, make them worth grading. Now, my dad, when he collected his 59 and 60 set, he had every card graded, including the commons. Every single card was graded in the whole set. And that made sense for that set because it was a really, really high grade set. Like his 60 set was an average 8.0 grade. So that means some of the commons were 9s. Most of the commons were 8s. And when you have a common from the 1960 set in an 8, especially some of the high numbers or some of the low population ones, they make sense to grade. So if it was a set in a high grade from the 50s or early 60s, then I might grade the whole thing. But if it's a set from the late 60s or 70s, or it's not in a super high grade set, like it's, the 56 top set, but it's a really low grade set, I would probably only grade the stars. So I don't think every card is worth grading. I think only the cards over a certain price point are worth grading. And what it really boils down to for me when I make the decision to grade is I say, if it costs me, so say I go to SGC and I pay $15 a card to get it graded, right? If the added value of having it graded, so if you take the raw value, so let's say I have XYZ card is worth $20 raw, but if it got a 4, it would be worth $50. And I think it's a 4 or a 5, then I'm going to grade it because the added value that you get from grading it, which only costs you $15, is more than the $15 that it costs you to grade it. So it's a situation by situation answer. Any card that any holder And I think whenever you are trying to figure out, well, what's it worth now? What's it going to be worth now? I think you have to kind of be a pessimist. You have to go, okay, worst case scenario is that card gets a 6. Worst case scenario, raw right now, it's worth, $20. If it got a 6, is it worth more than $35 if right now it's worst case scenario worth $20? So if the added value of the worst case scenario grade is more than the cost of getting the card graded, then that's when I would consider grading. So it really depends, but I also understand wanting to leave a collection raw. I understand wanting to leave them all in binders, and that's fine. If you're okay leaving them in binders, then leave them in binders. But if you're looking at what's the financial move depends on the added value from getting it graded versus leaving it ungraded. But that's my opinion of the financial move. As a collector, I could totally see why you'd want to leave it raw, leave them all in there, and then just flip through them. And then maybe get a filler card for that card in the set. So when you're flipping through it, the card's still there, but it's just a much lower quality card. So it's still in there when you're flipping through it. Because a lot of the times you'll look, like GMC Auctions does this a lot, right? Greg Moore's cards, they'll have like fillers. That just means it's the card, but it's not really that nice. And that would be a good card to put as a placeholder. So that would be my take. That would be my opinion. In my case, with the one set that I have, I've not yet graded any of the cards, but there are, 2, 3, 4 that I have given serious consideration to grading.
Why do you believe that the number of black athletes like Jackie Robinson, Satchel Paige, and Josh Gibson have recently become so collectible?
All right. So now Ken has asked some questions before, and he always asks good questions, and I've used some of his questions before. And some of his questions are tough. I think this is a really tough question. It's a really delicate question. I was on Bench Clear Media on Mike Moynihan's channel 6 months ago. And he was talking about how much during the pandemic, Jackie Robinson cards went up, Satchel Paige cards went up, Roberto Clemente cards went up. And it's funny that you mentioned those specific players because those were 3 of the ones that we talked about. And I said to Mike, I asked Mike, I kind of thought it was maybe a little bit of a leading question. I said, why do you think that is? Why do you think those cards went up during the pandemic as much as they went up? They went up more than a lot of other players in that kind of same realm. And he said, well, I think when people look at cards like Mantle and they look at cards like Koufax and they look at cards, of some of the other great players of the time, you go, why are these guys so undervalued? And I'm going to use my dollars to buy these guys because they're undervalued. And then it's helped kind of make up the ground between them. And I think there's truth to that. I do think that there was some lower values of those guys. And they were a good buy and are a good buy. But the question is, why were they valued lower? Why didn't they have higher values? Why wasn't a Satchel Paige card, on pace with some of the other cards in those sets that it seems like he should be valued similarly to? And why did it change in the 2020, 2021, 2019, 2022 timeframe? Well, again, none of us know. It's all speculation, right? It's all speculation, so none of us know. But I go back to, well, what was different then? And I think a few things were different then. I think number one, a lot of people got back into the hobby during the pandemic. So when people got back into the hobby during the pandemic and they had money that they wanted to spend on the hobby, they go, well, I can't afford, the 53 Mantle, but man, Satchel Paige is affordable. I'm going to go for that. Or they go, man, I want, the 58 Mantle or 58 Mays, but I can't afford that. But I can't afford the 58 Clemente. And Clemente was a great player too. So I do think that a lot of people coming into the market were looking for deals, and they came in with a fresh set of eyes. And that fresh set of eyes saw some kind of low-hanging fruit of some undervalued, underpriced guys. I think that's part of it. But you also let's just look at the country like as a whole during that time. During that time, there was a lot of social change happening, right? You've got things going on with protests and people taking stands on different issues. I mean, the NBA was doing things where, a lot of the players were wearing different shirts, and they were wearing things on their warm-ups, and they were making statements about different political issues. And I think that there are some people out there that you take notice of that, because how could you not? When LeBron James is talking about something all the time, or even coaches. I mean, Steve Kerr was talking about things, and there's stuff in society. What happens is it's hard not to notice, and then you take a step back and you go, wait a second. It does seem like maybe there are some, and just using sports cards as an example, there are some players that haven't gotten the love that maybe they should have gotten the love. And is that because of social opinions? Is that because of some racist roots? And is that because of some things from, different issues that people have in different beliefs? And I think that a lot of people in the younger generation, have grown up in a much different time than the older generation, and things have changed. Some things have changed for the better, some things have changed for the worse. And so I think what ends up happening is when you have some new people coming in the hobby and they're looking for deals, and we're talking about people that did great things, and it's a social thing that's happening, and people are saying, hey man, why aren't we giving as much love to Jesse Owens as Jesse Owens deserved? Or why didn't we, appreciate Jackie Robinson as much as we should have appreciated Jackie Robinson? And some of these names, and you have some outspoken people talking about these issues. It doesn't take many people to say, that's a good point. I do appreciate what Jackie Robinson did, and I want his cards because that was an important figure in history. And it doesn't take a lot of people to start to target some of those players that maybe historically were overlooked for some of those same reasons. And it makes the prices jump. So I do think that a lot of younger people with different backgrounds coming into the hobby had something to do with it. And a fresh set of eyes looking for deals had something to do with it. But I don't think we can ignore the fact that some of the social movements that were happening at the time were having an effect on enough people that enough people were starting to go, yeah, that person was an icon. That person was a hero. That person did overcome a lot of things that other baseball players at that time didn't have to overcome. I've mentioned this before, like when I look at cards of guys like Monty Irvin or Jackie Robinson or Larry Doby, they look so happy. There's not a bad Monty Irvin card, and there's not a bad Jackie Robinson card, and there's not a bad Willie Mays card, and there's not a lot of these guys their cards look great, especially the early cards. And part of it, I think, is because they're so happy because they overcame something that a lot of us can't even imagine having to deal with. And so those are guys we should look up to, because not only did you make it, but you made it and you overcame things that other people didn't have to overcome. That's part of the beauty of a Hank Aaron or a Jackie Robinson, is some of the treatment that those guys got other people didn't have to deal with. So they were great. And Satchel Paige, and I can go on and on and on. And they overcame it and they were great. That makes you better than a great player. That makes you a great player and a social icon. And that's another piece of it, is I think more and more people are collecting players not just on how beloved they were as a player or how well known they were as a player. I feel like the collecting community is more right now also interested in historical significance of a player. You know, my dad talks all the time about Curt Flood. And it's like, Curt Flood was a very historically significant player, not just for baseball and players' rights, but all sports. Very significant guy. And I feel like people are not just collecting stat lines. They're collecting societal heroes. And that's one of the reasons I think non-sport cards have had an uptick in demand, is because non-sport cards of heroes, of national heroes, are cool. They're cool. And what if you're a great baseball player and you overcame all these obstacles and you're a national hero, partly because of what you did overcome? I think that people are getting more into the story of these historical figures and these all-time great players. And I think that's part of it too. I don't think we can ignore the part about the social stuff. Whether we agree with how the items were brought up, how they were brought up, the way that different athletes or leagues or people or players brought these topics up. We can agree with that or we cannot agree with that. But what it did do is it put some of these social figures into the mainstream culture again and allowed people to take a step back and reflect and go, yeah, Jackie Robinson was important, but Larry Doby was too. And Minnie Minoso was too. They were important as well. And Roberto Clemente was too. And these people these players who came from different regions and broke through and became great players, overcame things in addition to being great players. So I think that has something to do with it. There are a lot of things that, have taken place over the last few years, and I'm not a huge fan, and this goes on both parties, both groups, both sides of the spectrum. The way that people have gone about their sharing their opinions has not always been the way I wish that people had shared them. But it has opened some people's eyes to some of the things that are going on both sides. And a little bit of a change can result in a fair amount of a price change. That's my take. Tell me if you think I'm crazy. And some people may have already clicked me off, but that's okay. That's my opinion.
Do you collect stickers or oversized cards? What do you think is their place in this hobby?
I like this question a lot, and part of the reason I like this question a lot is because all type of collecting has roots. There are roots in things, you know. The old tobacco cards, the size of them was smaller, and the reason it was smaller so it could fit in a pack of cigarettes. And a pack of cigarettes then was different than a pack of cigarettes is now. And so the card size is different than it is now. And that's important because as things change, you know, but things still have roots. And for example, soccer cards. Soccer cards have grown in popularity, and I really think that if Fanatics really does make the, you know, card community 10x, then part of what Fanatics is going to have to do is grow the hobby worldwide. And by far, the worldwide most famous sport is soccer. So soccer cards, I think, have a big part of the potential growth of the hobby. And if you go back to early soccer cards, a lot of them are stickers. I mean, I just bid the other day, I didn't win it, but I bid on a Maradona card, and it was a sticker. It was an early Maradona card. You know, a lot of early Pele cards are stickers or stamps even. And so I think that there are roots with stickers. But then you go, well, you know, the 86 Fleer basketball, you know, the Jordan, and then there's the Jordan sticker and all the other stickers from that set. And for years, the All-Star cards were all stickers, right? I mean, for Fleer, the All-Stars were stickers for several years. And so I think that stickers definitely have a place in the hobby, especially when the stickers are shaped in the size and the look of cards. As far as oversized cards, you know, I didn't used to be a fan of exhibits cards. It just wasn't really my thing. But like more and more I'm around them, the more and more I like them. I think they're cool. And those are way oversized. You know, Redman cards. I think Redman cards are super cool. And they're oversized. I think there's a place in the hobby for all of it. Absolutely, there's a place in the hobby for all of it. What is the place? I don't know. That's up to the hobby to decide. But, you know, if I step up to a table and there's a cool Redman card and it's at a good price, I'll buy it in a second. If there's a card that's a sticker and it's of a player that I like and one that I like the looks of and it's a good deal, I'll buy it. You know, I'll buy an exhibits card. I have bought exhibits card. I bought a couple of exhibits cards at a show, you know, 2 months ago. So they definitely have a place in the hobby. I think as the whole super collector thing continues to expand, people go, oh, well, I'll start with the Topps base and then I'll work out from there. And because when people are done collecting their guy, they're not going to just stop. They're not going to go, okay, well, I guess I have all the Willie Mays base cards now, I'm done. No, they're going to go to the next tier and then the next thing and then the next thing. And so I think that the, you know, super collector collecting more than just the base stuff is on the rise. And if that's on the rise, I think there will be a rise in all of these sort of secondary, if you want to call them that, types of cards. I think they have long-term future. I think they're going to probably grow in demand, not shrink, my opinion.
With all the attention the Caitlin Clark versus Angel Reese rivalry is bringing to women's basketball, do you think it will increase the interest in the WNBA like Magic versus Bird in the NBA?
Oh man, you guys are bringing it this week. You guys are trying to get me canceled. All right, so here's my take on this question. Do I think the WNBA is going to blow up like the NBA did when Bird and Magic came on the scene? No, I don't think that's going to happen. I do think a few things, though. I think that women's sports are continuing to increase in popularity. You know, in the Olympics, women's beach volleyball ratings are high. I'm sure there's a few reasons for that, right? If you laughed just now, thank you. I think that, I'm kind of a UFC fan. I don't talk about it a lot. I've been to several UFC events in Vegas and in Northern California. And some of the biggest UFC fights are women's fights. I mean, when Ronda Rousey came on the scene, that was as big a fight as there was as a Rousey fight. And that created, I think it helped to water the seed of women's sports growing in popularity. Caitlin Clark is fun to watch. I mean, she'll shoot from anywhere. She'll talk trash. She's really good, really good. And her cards are fairly popular and have a decent demand. And I think that we should kind of want that. We want to bring more people into the hobby. I mean, you go to a card show and you walk around. How many girls do we see? How many women do we see? Not many. If we want the hobby to be healthy, shouldn't we want to find ways to get more people into the hobby? So I think it would be great if, like, women's basketball cards, whether it be college or WNBA or whatever, grew in popularity because it could bring more gals into this hobby, which is good for the hobby. And I continue to say, I think that sports cards are like the best way to learn about business, to be an entrepreneur, how to talk to people, buy low, sell high, supply and demand as far as prices of, popularity and vintage and taking care of things. It's such a great way to get started with a business mindset. And if we could get more girls doing that at a young age, I think that would be amazing. I don't think the WNBA is going to explode, but I do think that the WNBA, with some of these personalities, is going to grow some. It's not going to Bird Magic, early 1980s explode, but it is gaining some popularity and it is gaining some interest because of these personalities and talents that are out there. But, even when you look at some other sports, I mean, like in tennis, the Williams sisters were huge for tennis and women's sports. There are a lot of sports that have popularity in women's sports, and that's a good thing. And if we could somehow get that to roll over into cards and get some girls interested in cards because some of the figures that they see, I mean, my daughter's a big-time soccer player. I've talked about it. She loves Carly Lloyd. I bought her a Carly Lloyd autograph card for Christmas last year. And one of her Christmas presents was a Carly Lloyd autograph. So just one way to try to get her interested. Now, my other daughter is she played some soccer, but she's really into Star Wars. So I bought her a Grogu, a Baby Yoda rookie card for Christmas last year, just trying to get them to kind of be interested in the hobby. But that's one of the reasons I think that, the Marvel cards growing in popularity is big, and the Pokemon cards and the, Garbage Pail Kid cards and the, whatever you want to insert. I mean, Star Wars cards, there's so many of them, Stranger Things cards, all of that is good because it gets more people into the hobby. And there's so much that young people can learn from this. So look where I got. I wasn't intending to get to this point when I first read this question, but here I am. This is the stream of consciousness response, always. I don't have anything written down. If I did, I would probably have some smarter things to say at times. I think it will help the WNBA. I think that rivalry will absolutely help the WNBA. And I think that it will, big personalities and big talents are interesting. But at the end of the day, what Americans and sports fans always seem to thrive the most is power. They want pitchers that throw hard. They want hitters that hit far. They want dunks. They want athleticism. They want long touchdown runs and catches and big hits over the middle. That's what people want. And when those things aren't happening in the WNBA, that is going to make the WNBA continue to lack some of what sports fans crave. I think if they lowered the hoop, to 9.5 feet, that might be interesting. Or that might be more, oh boy, I'm in trouble. That might be more interesting because I think a lot of the power and the dunking and the force could be more incorporated into the sport. All right, if you're still watching, thank you for still watching. And if you have a question for an upcoming episode, again, down below, simply type it into the comments. Remember, you still have time. All the way through Sunday of this week, I am taking submissions for the Mickey Mantle All-Star Card giveaway. Remember, follow me on Whatnot. Leave your Whatnot username below. If you don't have a Whatnot account yet, then don't forget, use my link that has a $15 credit attached to it when you use my link to sign up for Whatnot. Good luck at the Whatnot Card Show 3 this weekend. If you see me in a room, if you see me come in a room, because I'm going to be bouncing in and out of all the rooms too, I'm excited about this. Give me a shout out. Say, hey, give me a little comment. I look forward to running into you guys there. And thanks for watching.